Hello everyone, welcome back to Books of Genghis Khan. I'm Ben, and today I have for you my gushing review for the Green Bone Saga by Fonda Lee. I just recently finished it up. I read it all over the course of 2 months, so nice binge that I had going, and I greatly enjoyed my time with the series. So I'm mostly going to be taking you through a lot of the reasons why I think it worked really well for me, and a couple of very small nitpicks, but really, this was an overwhelmingly positive experience that I had with all three books. And what usually takes me a little time to get into a standalone or new series, new world, new plotting, characters, but about halfway through Jade City, some really dramatic events happened that kind of set the stage for what is to come, and I was so hooked by then, and it was just gripping from that point on through the end of the series. I want to focus on four main aspects of the writing, and that would be the plotting, then the world building and prose kind of together, the pacing, and finally the character work. A lot of people gush over the character writing more than anything in the series, and I think it was extremely well done. But I'm not one of those booktubers who's going to say that they're a character first reader or a character only reader. I'm in it for the entirety of the experience. The plotting and world building setting usually very important for me to enjoy the character arcs and journeys at the same time. So I want to focus on some of the other elements first, and I'll come back to the characters at the end. So one of the reasons why I just loved the whole trilogy was the airtight architecture and plotting that Lee constructed for each book and the entire series. I really love when things are placed in early in the series or in books and they come back around and those seeds end up growing into really important aspects of the plot later on. And we had a lot of that kind of plotting in this trilogy. And as we went along, we kind of increased the scope. So book one really had a very insular focus around Kikon and even just the city of Janloon in particular. And then book two opened that up a little bit more as one of the POV characters was living abroad, and we kind of got more of a geographic scope and are in a different place, and different things are factoring in to what's happening back in Kikon as well. And so everything is starting to get more expansive and interconnected, and that just even continues further in book three as we start to go to more and more locations in this Earth analog that Lee created. And there were so many different kinds of side plots and side characters, little threads that we spent some time creating or just experiencing, and I was so curious all the time how things were going to play in or if they were going to be important to the overarching plot. And they were in every single case. Small side characters usually ended up coming back in certain ways and being important. And I don't think there was a single dangling plot thread left hanging by the end of the series. And I just love when that is the case. And it might be the reason why I did not like the last few books of the Lightbringer series by Brent Weeks, and maybe why I don't connect as much to sprawling series like Malazan Book of the Fallen as much as some of the mega fans do, because I really like that tightly plotted feeling, and we had that with the Green Bone Saga. And not only was it tightly plotted with few dangling threads, or any, it was very unpredictable and satisfying in how each book played out. I always felt like there were tense, dramatic events and reveals or moments that we were building to, and I could never predict exactly how things were going to play out. And then things ended up, the way things fell usually left me in a satisfied or tense or just very emotional place. And I don't think there really was any major missteps with the overarching plot. I was just along for that ride. But I will mention that there was a plot contrivance that happened in book three that was extremely minor in the grand scheme of the series, but I think that was the only time I was kind of taken out of the narrative and kind of had my suspension of disbelief kind of ruined for a bit, is when two characters kind of just had a chance meeting and it created just unnecessary drama, and a few plot points that stemmed from it I felt were very predictable. But other than that, seemingly very avoidable plot contrivance in book 3. And if you want to know what I'm talking about and you're not sure, you could ask me in the comments. It was just all perfect on the plotting front, and in a way that was just captivating for me. So yes, I adored the plotting of this series, and it's just firing on all cylinders. The next element I want to chat about was the world building and some of the prose choices that played into that. So this is a very interesting series for fantasy in that it is not a very different world than our modern Earth. It's kind of set up so that different countries in this world are kind of similar to some Earth analogs. Like you can tell that maybe there's a Russia analog, or one for China, or one for maybe the US or UK, or a Northern European country. And it's a very simplified world, so there's not that many countries that get named or that factor in. But that, I think, goes a long way for helping me feel grounded in the read. I feel like I don't have to work too hard to understand the kind of the political realities or day-to-day life, because it is essentially like our Earth society and civilization, but just with slight differences, and Jade is the major one. But it's like we're experiencing a post-World War II, late 20th century kind of society. And so that world building was very easy to fall into, but where Lee really kind of shined with her own unique world building is with Jade, this magical element. And I loved the magical abilities that Jade could bestow. They were fascinating. They made people who could control Jade really overpowered, but they had to work for it because it has physical effects. It requires years of discipline and study to master the Jade disciplines. And there's different ones like channeling, how it could both destroy and heal. Love that. There's ways of fighting with it through deflection and strengthening your body with steel. And it also made guns kind of much less of a factor, and so people fight more with swords and knives, and that was really cool for the action in the series. But what is really special about the world building with Jade is all of the kind of ripple effects of Jade and how it's controlled by the clans in Kikon, and how it's a scarce resource and really makes the wares very powerful. And it makes it so that really there's this insular kind of green bone culture who uses Jade and wears Jade, and then all of the civilians outside of that. And there's this interesting barrier between those that Jade creates. Also, don't want to forget the emotional auras that Jade wearers have. And since a lot of the POV characters wear Jade and can sense others' auras, we get this great aspect of characters being able to sense the emotions that others are having in the scenes, which I really loved. But thinking about other effects of Jade, the economic effects, the kind of social dynamics that come about because of the social status of Jade. So ones who can't carry a lot, or who haven't earned a lot, or who are stone eyes, that they're not reactive to it at all, just how their status is affected, and there may be outcasts within the Green Bone Society. Things like that made me feel like Lee really just felt through all of the effects of this one major supernatural addition to a very Earth-like setting. And I want to discuss the prose choices and how they played into the immersive world building. So it was so easy to get situated within this Green Bone Society because of the in-world jargon. Things like green and green bone, and the different meanings of green as slang. And words like pillar, fist, finger, weatherman, the names of the clans, mountain, no peak, other ones like luckbringer or lantern men. These are such critical words for this kind of small Jade wearing society and the clans. They constantly are coming up, and they just felt right. They gave off the right vibe for what each of the words stood for. And the fact that characters are continually using this in-world jargon just it really helped me be immersed in this culture. And so that was just fantastic. Other things like Aisho, the word for honor in the Green Bone Society, and how honor is so important within Green Bone Society. And it's not just something that people talk about, they actually back it up. And it seems like a lot of people really care about their oaths and their honor in this Kikan Greenbone culture. And then other things like the name honorifics, like if you were part of the clan or wearing green, that people are supposed to use a particular honorific before your name. Lots of little cultural touches like that really brought this world alive to me and kept me really immersed. So yeah, just want to absolutely compliment Fonda Lee's world building and interesting choices that she made with keeping things similar to our own modern Earth, but the changes she did make really felt so deep and thought through. And I think there were a lot of interesting themes. I guess I'll talk about this other aspect similar to world building, but really a lot of interesting real world themes got brought in to this whole narrative. Things about like indigenous rights and racism towards indigenous peoples or immigrants and the immigrant experience, personal identity issues like dealing with family or societal obligations versus your own ambitions, or not having a normative sexuality. So there's all these different social issues, including ones like being at the bottom of the social ladder in a society, or not being economically privileged, and what that's like when a society has kind of cast you out or not doing much to value you. There's so many different real world social issues that Lee just weaves in to this storyline so deftly. It didn't feel like anything was preaching, and it was just all naturally and organically part of the main storytelling. So just really wonderful in terms of working in so many deep, meaningful themes. The other standout in the world building for me was the clans themselves, and that this is not an organized crime story. Lee took inspiration from real-world organized crime around the world, and from maybe some media like The Godfather, and making it more of like a family drama as the main focus. But Lee has done something completely unique here, because these clans were integral in terms of fighting for Kikan's independence and being part of the group that founded this new modern nation of Kikan. And they are legal entities. They kind of have their own institutions in the country separate from the civilian government, and they work together, and they were always meant to work together to lead the country. And it seems like the clans have huge popular support, more so than most, I think, democratic governments ever have in our own world. And so these are not criminal organizations that are, forcing lots of people in society to do things against their will and causing havoc. They are providing lots of social services and patronage for their members, and it's a real give and take that makes a lot of sense for this society and seems to work really well. And the clans themselves, we only really get POVs from one of the clans, but the No Peak clan and the leadership seems to really have the best interests of the country, and it's all of its clan members at its core kind of mission. It's not just existing to benefit the family at the top of the clan and to gain wealth. That is part of it, and it is interesting to see, the benefits and the privilege that the kind of highest up clan members do have. But it's so interesting how this unique society that Lee created functions, and the different tensions in the society between the Greenbone clans and the people out of it, to see that there is some dissent, and it's not that everyone in the society supports them. And we get a lot of that through one of the POVs who is not part of the clans. And so it's such a fascinating society that Lee set up, and delivering something that is very unique and fresh and not an organized crime story like I really thought I was going to be getting when I came into this. But seeing that these clans actually, are not in the shadows, they are legally sanctioned, and they're doing a lot of good for the country, at least some of the time. This was really just an intriguing aspect of the whole story for me, and definitely one of the highlights. All right, the next aspect of the trilogy that I really want to focus on is the pacing. Now, this was one of the faster paced series I've ever read. I felt like I was just propelled to keep reading these and never put them down and finish them in no time. And so they're not the longest books. First of all, they're all kind of like in that 500 to 600 page range. And so they're not the chunkiest, but lots of different aspects, I think, play into this very fast-paced feel. And it's a feel that I tend to really love, since like other fast-paced series like Faithful and the Fallen and Shadows of the Apt are some of my favorites. Red Rising trilogy. I do very much love these faster-paced reads, although I can appreciate the slow burns as well, since I just love the Live Ship Traders, which is so different, because that one has really deliberate pacing with long chapters where scenes last a long time, and it's maybe a long time between important narrative events. But in Green Bone Saga, the chapters just are very short, and they zip you off to different POVs after each chapter is done. So you're constantly changing your POV, your location, your priorities, what you're thinking about. It seems like new important events are just always about to happen or are happening. And so, yeah, there's just a continually switching around of character, and the short chapters, I think, contribute a lot to that. But there's just the sheer number of crucial narrative events that are happening, whether they're on the action side of things or more just the interpersonal side. It seems like important things are always happening. The tension's always high, and I was very much just propelled through in a very fast-paced way that felt like a roller coaster ride. So her prose, I think, also plays into that, because it has this modern, crisp feel to it, similar to John Gwynne or Adrian Tchaikovsky. I think it very much accomplishes that window pane style that Sanderson talks about, where it's just the vehicle for the story and doesn't get in the way. It's not trying to call too much attention to itself by being flowery or poetic, but it felt sophisticated all the same, and definitely pitched at an adult level. And so I just really loved the actual prose and writing style here, and contributed to that fast pace. Another reason I think it felt so fast paced is because there is such a great variety of scenes that we get. We go from just a kind of family, interpersonal kind of conversation scene to a slice of life scene in an academy, or someone trying to, just make a new life for themselves somewhere, or a very tense action scene. And I loved the action scenes in here. I almost wish we got more of them, but because they're somewhat rare, when they do happen, they're so impactful and tense. We bounce around to romantic kind of scenes and sex scenes that can get pretty spicy. So just be aware of that if that's something you're not in love with. But I just loved the full variety of scenes, and a lot of scenes where we're strategizing with the characters for clan tactics and overarching strategy to try to position themselves better. So there is just both in terms of switching around to characters, and just the type of scene is constantly shifting, and so it's always feeling new and fresh. Yet another reason why the pacing just worked so well for me throughout the trilogy. I'll bring up one of my other small nitpicks here, which is that I did not particularly love the few interludes that we got. So mostly the book is written in third-person limited perspective, where we're in for a whole chapter, we're just in one character's mind and hearing their thoughts, seeing what they see. But every so often we get a brief interlude that comes from a kind of voiceless, omniscient narrator, and it tells us a bit of history of this world, and it's usually related to things that are going on in the present day, but I never felt like it was essential to me, and I was so immersed in the present day narrative that it was always pretty jarring to get those interludes, and it always took me out of the story, and I don't think it was worth it for me to lose that immersion. But thankfully they were always very brief. They're just usually a few pages long. They didn't take long to get through. I do think a lot of people will like the extra world building and lore and history we get in them, but maybe just not necessary for me personally. The other prose thing was that 99.999% of the sentences in the non-interlude chapters are in that third-person limited perspective, but there are a few strange sentences where Lee reverts to the omniscient kind of narrator in those other chapters, and they always just immediately took me out of my immersion. I'm like, wait, what's that? The character couldn't have been thinking that. So that's the omniscient narrator all of a sudden popping in. And because it was so infrequent, and usually the omniscient narrator was limited to the interludes, that always took me out, and I never felt like there was a real important reason for that to happen. And so I think I would have just preferred those character-based chapters to be fully third-person limited. But that only happened a few times, and truly these were very minor things that barely registered as blips in my experience. But I did want to mention this. All right, the last major element that I want to gush about is the character writing. So as most people experience, and I think as Lee has often said, I've seen her say that she felt like she became a character writer with this series. And it's not surprising to hear her say that, because all the POV characters leapt off the page in full, vivid, three-dimensional life for me. None of them felt like cardboard characters. That goes for side characters as well. They did not feel 2D or like cardboard cutouts with just, one main like stereotypical personality trait. That's often a pet peeve of mine in series when maybe not enough distinctiveness is given to a lot of these side characters, and minor characters don't spend too much time on the page. But that is not a problem here. From the side characters to the secondary characters who do get a good amount of page time to the main POV characters, all of them jumped off the page. They all felt distinctive, like they had their own personalities, their own priorities, the way they related to the world, their own different emotional lives, and I really loved all of the POV characters. So I know a lot of people have certain favorites, but I'm lucky I just got attached to them all, really loved inhabiting all of their different perspectives, and was so impressed with the character arcs for all these characters and side characters, because we cover a lot of years through the trilogy, and it was a pleasure to track the character growth. Sometimes subtle, sometimes more obvious, larger changes for certain characters, and it was a real pleasure to see that over time. It was also interesting to see some characters kind of stay flat and not change, and I think that's very true to life, in that some people, based on where they are in life or their personality, do change a lot more than others who might be just more set in their personalities. And so we just have a great variety of character types, and I really love what Lee was doing with her character writing here. So no complaints on this front. It was very easy to get emotional about these characters, whether the ones that you're sort of rooting for, that I formed emotional attachments to, or ones that I felt some hatred or anger towards. She got me feeling a lot towards a lot of these characters, and when that is the case, something is going right with the writing, and that it is a series that is for you. And really, it was all of these aspects working together to form this immersive, engaging read that got me invested. It was the characters, but in this particular setting with this particular vivid world building, very interesting, with lots of thematic resonance with our real world, and then the really fast pacing that propelled me along and kept me going, never wanting to put it down, and the tight plotting where it felt unpredictable, it felt always very high stakes, and that really important events were always happening or coming close to happening, and the tension was just so high. So I loved the tight plotting, loved basically everything Lee was doing here, and it's definitely one of my favorite series. And I've read so many series that I've loved, it's hard to figure out where to rank them all, but I don't think it's going to go in my top 10 of all time, because I tend to just grow most attached to series that have more of an epic scope to them, maybe beyond more of that feel of our modern world. And this one takes place in a world that's so analogous to our present day world, that it feels a lot different than, say, things I've read like the Stormlight Archive or Sun Eater or Shadows of the Apt. I think a lot of those other series capture my imagination and transcend my own existence here in this time and place more so than the Green Bone Saga did. But that's definitely not the Green Bone Saga's fault, just by the nature of what kind of story it's telling and how closely kind of related to our current reality it is. But Green Bone Saga is this tight trilogy that's telling a different kind of story than a lot of other epic fantasy, and I think that's why so many people have loved it so much, because it does feel unique in the genre and fresh, even fresh as an organized crime story, because it's doing something completely different with that. So all of this to say, if you have not read it, you should totally check it out. Give it a try in print or on audio. I actually started this on doing it hybrid like I usually do and listening to a lot of the audio. And the audio by Andrew Kashino wasn't really clicking in the beginning of Jade City, but maybe it was because just it took time for the whole thing to click in for me. But I sped it up a little bit more than I usually do. I felt like his default narration was a little bit robotic. I also wasn't in love with his character voices, but about halfway through Jade City, it was all working for me, including the narration. And by the end of the series, I was mostly listening to it by audio because I was really enjoying it that much. And I really look forward to hearing his audio for the Greenbone short stories, the Jade Shards. There's some prequel short stories that have been released, I think, in ebook already, or they will soon, and the narration should be available for those soon. So can't wait to get a little bit more of the Greenbone Saga through these short stories. And I should mention, I did read Jade Setter of Janloon, which was also a very enjoyable little novella. Definitely has its own kind of standalone plot and new characters, although you do get some character crossovers because it's a prequel that takes place just a few years before the start of Jade City. But that was a fun, engaging little novella, and so you would get even more than just the main trilogy with this whole series if you want. But yeah, if you haven't read it, check it out, see if the storytelling style and the kind of story it is clicks in, because it might not. It is very much a heavy on family drama, and because it's set so close to an Earth-like place, it feels very different than the norm. But if you've already enjoyed it, I've hoped you've kind of liked seeing what I got out of it, and let me know what were your favorite aspects of the series and things that were working or that didn't work for you. And yeah, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you later.